welcome for all of you who are watching. You're tuned into TMH and this is our English Daily News. Our headlines for today: Executive Director of World Peace Foundation says US and EU must act urgently to avert a possible genocide. Tigrayans demand expulsion of Ethiopian and Eritrean delegations from the IMF and World Bank annual meetings. And Horn of Africa analyst praises Ireland for its moral stance at the UN Security Council. As we move on to our main updates for today, Executive Director of the World Peace Foundation says US and EU must act urgently to avert a possible genocide. Professor Alex DeWall wrote on a responsible statecraft that Tigray faces a new onslaught by joint Ethiopian and Eritrean forces and federal offenses. Alex DeWall said that there's chatter about peace talks, but sharp disagreement on the mediator and the agenda, as the Tigrayans want an immediate cessation of hostilities and humanitarian access, while the federal government wants to negotiate without any preconditions, which according to DeWall is code for allowing its offensive to continue. The professor noted that Abiy's diplomatic strategy is aimed at buying time, and apparently it's working. And according to Alex DeWall, Abiy Ahmed, having spurned U.S. demands for a cessation of hostilities back in September and suffered no adverse consequences, confidently dictated the terms of a peace process to the African Union Commission chairperson Moussa Faki. He added that U.S. and EU must act urgently in support of Kenyan ex-president Kenyatta to avert a possible genocide. DeWall pointed out that whatever happens, the pillars of the Ethiopian state security institutions, finances, and the elite bargain have crumbled, and that the state collapse is just a matter of time. For now, the issue is how to stop Isaias directing another genocidal onslaught on Tigray and their people, and that will take more than words. Every day counts, as DeWall cautioned in his article. The International Monetary Fund, also known as the IMF, had their annual committee meeting yesterday, and members of the Tagaru diaspora were in attendance to make their voices heard. Timnit Bayru has more on this story.
Tigrayans demand expulsion of Ethiopian and Eritrean delegations from IMF and World Bank annual meeting. Tigrayans protested at the IMF and World Bank headquarters in Washington, D.C. on Thursday. They demanded the expulsion of Ethiopian and Eritrean delegations from the 2022 annual meetings, which began on Monday. They called on authorities of the world financial institutions to stop funding genocide in Tigray. The protesters sent a clear message to the authorities here that financial assistance or loan requests from both nations should not be granted, as the money may be used to fund what they described as genocide in Tigray. The protesters, carrying a big banner that read "No money to Ethiopia genocide," accused the international community and financial institutions such as the World Bank and the IMF of paying lip service to the world's biggest humanitarian crisis unfolding in Tigray, a region in northern Ethiopia. A devastating blockade imposed by the governments of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, the President Isaias Afwerki of Eritrea, has sealed off close to 6 million people for about 22 months, according to the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and other humanitarian agencies that have been monitoring the situation in the Horn of Africa. One of the protesters, Simon Tesfaye, who spoke to Today News Africa on behalf of others, explained how Tigrayans have been suffering for the past 700 plus days.
We are here to protest and ask the World Bank to reject the delegation that was sent by Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki to negotiate and raise funds for the ongoing war and genocide that's happening in northern part of Ethiopia. As we all know, Tigrayans have been suffering for the past 700 plus days. Drones are being used to massacre innocent children, and funds coming from entities like the World Bank, the United States government, are being used to buy bombs, drones, and other related weapons to mass massacre innocent civilians. A couple of weeks ago, a kindergarten was bombed. Over 7 children, the youngest being 2 years, has been killed. And these drones were being financed by funds that are coming from entities like the World Bank, IMF, and the likes. So we are here to ask the World Bank to reject the delegation that was sent and to uphold its part of its core mission to spread democracy and equality across the world. You can't say this while you're having innocent civilians that are being massacred in Tigray. So the delegation has entered the building as we speak, and they're negotiating with the World Bank in regards to fundings. We would like to ask the World Bank to reject this negotiation and send them back to where they come from and determine some sort of peace to our people. Then we can start talking about funds, and then we can talk about other development issues. While people are dying, being massacred, you can't come to the US to negotiate funds.
Last week, on Tuesday, an airstrike in Adadaro, near the border with Eritrea, hit a center for IDPs, killing at least 50 people. According to humanitarian officials in the area who spoke to the Times on the condition of anonymity, the Tigrayan protesters accused the World Bank, the IMF, and the international community of neglecting the war in Tigray because of racism, re-echoing an argument made not long ago by the World Health Organization chief, Dr. Tedros Adhanom.
Thank you, Timnit. Where is humanity? Asked the helpless doctor of Ethiopia's embattled Tigray region. One of the greatest casualties of the brutal civil war in Ethiopia has been its healthcare system, with the country's northern Tigray region under complete blockade and cut off from most communications. A disastrous humanitarian crisis has been unfolding in a war that has now become a world's unseen war. Dr. Fasikam Desilase, a surgeon at Tigray's Idar Comprehensive Specialized Hospital, says our patients are getting basic medicines like antibiotics, IV fluids, and oxygen are not available. Dr. Fasika told National Public Radio that without these kinds of supplies, he's watched many patients die. This conflict has truly decimated the health system, says Lindsay Green, who's a senior program officer who's a researcher on sexual violence and other human rights violations at a Physicians for Human Rights. According to the Tigray Health Bureau, more than 80% of its hospitals have been destroyed or completely damaged. Rural clinics and health facilities are mostly non-operational, and medical workers, who are primarily government employees, haven't been paid in now months. Doctors have no choice but to wash and reuse gloves, and even on occasion resorting to plastic bags instead of gloves, distributing expired medications, halt elective surgeries, and turn away cancer patients, including children, due to the lack of chemotherapy. People with chronic conditions have been especially hard hit. Burhana Hailu, who's Ma'ala and 52, has type 2 diabetes, saying, "My main job is now worrying about my disease because I have children that I may not have to die and no one will take care of them." Insulin has become hard to come by, as Burhana borrowed some from his neighbor, but often goes without. Even our physicians and nurses are crying in front of us because they don't have something to give, as he says in tears. Kabrom Gabrasilase, who's a surgeon and a chief executive director at Idar Hospital in Ma'ala, the capital of Tigray, says it's difficult to lead a hospital in a conflict area under complete siege, and to make it even worse, no budget for operational activities either. It is human misery, an unprecedented calamity. We call for help. We plead for the entirety of the world to help us, but the silence is deafening. We sometimes ask, where is humanity? As we move on to our final update for today, Horn of Africa analyst praises Ireland for its moral stance at the UN Security Council. Rashid Abdi made a remark in a tweet he wrote in response to security advisor of the Ethiopian government, Redwan Hussein, for accusing Ireland of undermining his country. Redwan Hussein wrote on his official Twitter account that Ireland has been undermining Ethiopia incessantly for the last 2 years, and says that the Ethiopian government's repeated plea has been rebuffed. Hence, obliged to send an official ultimatum this week for the Irish government, as the security advisor said, adding Ethio-Irish relations is sadly at its nadir. Rashid wrote in response, Ireland is a nation that has suffered trauma and conflict, but also forged peace, beginning to heal finally. He added that Ireland is naturally drawn to empathy and solidarity with the victims of conflict, like the people of Tigray currently facing. Its moral stance at the UNSC is probably will go down in the annals of history, as Rashid Abdi stated. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.